The girl in the bookstore. There were two things I knew for sure that summer. I was stuck in a small town with nothing to do. I spent way too much time in the bookstore. Not that I minded. The bookstore was my escape. It was small and smelled like old paper and coffee. There were stacks of books everywhere, like little mountains of stories waiting to be explored. The owner, Mrs. Thompson, always let me sit on the floor and read as long as I wanted. That's where I first saw her. She was sitting in the corner, her long dark hair falling over her face as she read a book. She wore glasses that were slightly too big for her, and she was biting her lip like she was really thinking about something important. I didn't mean to stare, but something about her made me curious. She wasn't like the other girls in town, the ones who talked about makeup and Instagram. She looked like she belonged inside a novel, like a character someone had written into existence just to confuse me. I pretended to look at a book on the shelf near her. It was called The Universe and Everything in It, which felt ironic because at that moment, my universe had shrunk to just one person. She looked up suddenly, and our eyes met. "Are you actually going to read that, or are you just trying to look smart?" she asked. I blinked. I was just. She smiled a little amused like she had caught me in a lie. "Relax," she said. "It's a good book, but the ending sucks." I wasn't sure what to say. My brain felt slow, like it was still trying to process the fact that she had spoken to me. She closed her book and stood up. "Well, see you around, bookstore boy." And just like that, she walked away, leaving me standing there, holding a book I had no intention of reading. That was the moment I knew this summer was not going to be as boring as I thought. I didn't see her again for 3 days. Not that I was counting. Okay, I was counting. I went back to the bookstore every afternoon, pretending to look at books while secretly hoping she would walk in. Mrs. Thompson noticed. "Waiting for someone?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," I said too quickly. She just smiled and went back to organizing a stack of poetry books. I sighed and picked up The Universe and Everything in It again, flipping through the pages like I actually cared about the meaning of existence. And then, just as I was about to give up, she walked in. She wore ripped jeans and a faded band t-shirt that said "The stars are just old light." Her glasses were perched on top of her head this time, and she was holding a cup of coffee. She looked around like she was searching for something. Then her eyes landed on me. "Oh," she said, looking slightly surprised. "Bookstore boy." I tried to act cool. "Hey." She tilted her head. "Still pretending to read that book?" I glanced down at the book in my hands. I hadn't even realized I was holding the same one. "No." She smirked. "Right." She walked past me and headed straight for the poetry section. I hesitated, then followed. "So, do you have a name? Or should I keep calling you Bookstore Boy?" she asked, flipping through a book of poems. I swallowed. It's Ethan." She nodded, as if testing the name in her mind. "Ethan. Okay." I waited. "And you?" She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. Then she closed the poetry book and placed it back on the shelf. "I'll tell you next time," she said with a small smile. Then, just like last time, she walked away, leaving me standing there, wondering why a girl with no name had suddenly become the most interesting person in my universe. The next day, I found myself at the bookstore again, even though I told myself I wouldn't go. I sat in the corner with a book I wasn't reading and a coffee I didn't really want. And then, like some kind of magic trick, she appeared. She walked straight to the poetry section, picked up a book, and then, without looking up, said, "Are you just going to sit there? Or are you going to come over here?" I froze. She turned around and smirked. "I mean, you're making it kind of obvious." I stood up, clearing my throat like a normal human and not someone who had been waiting for her all day. "I'm just, browsing." She rolled her eyes. "Sure." She held up the book she was holding. "The Way to Stars" by some poet I had never heard of. "Ever read this?" I shook my head. She flipped to a random page and read aloud. "Some people burn like the sun. Bright, beautiful, but impossible to touch." Then she looked up at me. "What do you think?" I had no idea what to say. It was the kind of thing that felt too big for words. I said, "Sounds deep." She laughed. "Wow, such analysis." I scratched the back of my head. "Yeah, well, I'm not really a poetry guy." She tapped the book against her palm. "Maybe you should be." There was a pause, and then she sighed. "All right, bookstore boy. I guess I promised you my name." I straightened. "Yeah, you did." She leaned in slightly, like she was about to tell me some big secret. Then she whispered, But before she could finish, Mrs. Thompson appeared behind the counter. "Oh, I didn't know you two knew each other." The girl pulled back, her expression unreadable. "We don't," she said quickly. Then she turned back to me. "Not yet, anyway." And then, just like before, she walked away. I groaned and ran a hand through my hair. Not only did I still not know her name, but now I was even more sure of one thing. I wanted to. I had never worked so hard to learn someone's name before. It was like she was some kind of puzzle, and every time I thought I was close to solving her, she just gave me another clue instead of an answer. I didn't see her the next day or the day after that. I told myself it didn't matter, but I still went to the bookstore just in case. And then, on the third day, she was there, sitting at a small table near the window, drinking coffee and writing in a notebook. I hesitated before walking over. "Hey," I said. She glanced up. "Bookstore boy." I sat across from her. "Still not telling me your name?" She sighed dramatically. "You really care that much?" "Well, yeah," I admitted. "It's kind of weird not knowing." She studied me for a moment, then flipped to a new page in her notebook and started writing. After a few seconds, she tore the page out and slid it across the table. I picked it up. It wasn't her name. It was a list. Things to do before the end of summer. Watch the sunset from the rooftop of the bookstore. Have a midnight adventure. Find something that actually surprises me. I looked up at her, confused. "What is this?" She shrugged. "A deal. If we do all three things, I'll tell you my name." I blinked. "Seriously?" She smiled. "Seriously." I studied the list again. None of it seemed too impossible, but I had a feeling that with her, nothing would go the way I expected. "Okay," I said. "Deal." She grinned and leaned back in her chair. "Good, because sunset is in an hour." And just like that, I was in. An hour later, I found myself climbing a rusty fire escape behind the bookstore, wondering how exactly my life had led me to this moment. "Are you sure this is safe?" I asked, gripping the metal railing like it might crumble at any second. "Nope," she said cheerfully, already ahead of me. I sighed but kept climbing. By the time I reached the top, She was already sitting on the edge of the roof, her legs dangling over the side like she wasn't worried about gravity at all. She patted the space next to her. "Come on, bookstore boy. You made it this far." I sat down, keeping a safe distance from the edge because, unlike her, I had a very healthy fear of falling. The sun was just starting to set, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. The town stretched out below us, quiet and small, like a place frozen in time. She hugged her knees to her chest. "See? Worth it." I had to admit she was right. For a few minutes, we just sat there in silence, watching the sky change colors. Then she turned to me and asked, "So, why do you spend so much time in the bookstore?" I hesitated. "I like books." She gave me a look. "Obviously. But why?" I thought about it for a second. "I guess books make life feel bigger. Like there's more out there than just this town." She nodded like she understood. "Yeah, I get that." I glanced at her. "What about you?" She smiled slightly. "Maybe I just like confusing bookstore boys." I rolled my eyes. "Of course." She laughed, then looked back at the sunset. "No, but really, I like stories. I like the idea that every person is a story, and if you listen closely, you can hear the best ones." I looked at her, feeling like she was probably one of the best stories I had ever stumbled into. Before I could say anything, she stretched her arms out and sighed. "Well, that's one thing off the list." "One down, two to go," I said. She grinned. "And the next one is my favorite." I raised an eyebrow. "The Midnight Adventure." She nodded. "Better get some sleep, bookstore boy. You're going to need it." And just like that, she left me on the rooftop, wondering what I had just signed up for. At exactly 11:57 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Meet me outside. Bring snacks." I stared at the message for a second before quietly slipping out of bed. My parents were asleep, and the whole house was dark except for the glow of my phone. I grabbed a bag of chips from the kitchen, shoved them in my hoodie pocket, and carefully climbed out my window. She was waiting for me at the end of my street, wearing an oversized hoodie and holding a flashlight. "Nice of you to show up, bookstore boy," she said. I yawned. "You do realize normal people sleep at this time, right?" She grinned. "Yeah, but normal is boring." I had no argument for that, so I just followed her as she led me toward the edge of town. "So," I said, "try not to trip over anything in the dark. What exactly is this midnight adventure?" She swung the flashlight back and forth. "That would ruin the surprise." We walked for a while, past the quiet houses, past the old gas station, until the streets turned to dirt roads and the town felt far away. The stars above us looked brighter here, untouched by the streetlights. Finally, we stopped in front of an old chain-link fence. She turned to me. "Ever been inside a cemetery at midnight?" I blinked. Can't say I have." She smiled. "First time for everything." Before I could say anything, she grabbed the fence and climbed over it like she had done this 100 times before. I hesitated, looking around, half expecting a security guard to appear out of nowhere. "Are we even allowed to do this?" I asked. She was already on the other side, waiting. "I won't tell if you won't." I sighed, knowing I was going to regret this, and climbed over. The cemetery was quiet, except for the sound of crickets and the wind rustling through the trees. The flashlight beam bounced over old gravestones, their names and dates barely visible in the dark. Okay, I whispered. I have to ask, why are we here? She pointed ahead. That. I followed her gaze and saw an old stone bench beneath a giant tree. The branches stretched out like arms, and the roots curled around the ground like something out of fairy tale. She sat down on the bench and patted the space next to her. This is my favorite spot in the whole town. I sat beside her, still not totally sure what we were doing here. You hang out in cemeteries often? She shrugged. Sometimes. It's peaceful, and it reminds me that life is short. I looked at her, but she was staring up at the stars, lost in thought. Do you ever think about how one day we'll just be names on a stone? She asked softly. I swallowed. Not really. She smiled. That's probably for the best. For a while we just sat there, listening to the wind. Then she sighed. All right, second thing off the list. I checked my phone. 1:13 a.m. You're kind of weird, you know that? I said. She grinned. Yeah, but you're still here. I didn't have an answer for that. As we climbed back over the fence and started walking home, I realized something. I didn't even care about the list anymore. I just wanted to keep following her into the unknown. The next day, she didn't show up at the bookstore, or the next, or the one after that. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. She was unpredictable. Maybe she had better things to do than finish some list she had made up. But the truth was, I kept checking my phone. I kept looking at the poetry section like she might just appear out of thin air. She didn't. On the fourth day, I gave up waiting and did something completely out of character. I went looking for her. I didn't know much about her life outside of our late-night adventures and bookstore conversations, but I did remember one thing. She had once mentioned a coffee shop she liked. So I went there. The place was small and quiet, with mismatched chairs and bookshelves lining the walls. I ordered a coffee I didn't even want, and just when I was about to leave, I saw her. She was sitting at a corner table, staring at her notebook, but not writing anything. She looked different, smaller somehow, like a version of herself without the usual spark. I walked over and sat down across from her. She looked up, surprised. Bookstore boy, you disappeared, I said. She shrugged. I didn't disappear. She hesitated, then sighed. I needed a break. From what? She ran a hand through her hair. From everything. For the first time since I met her, she looked tired. I didn't know what to say, so I just reached into my backpack and pulled something out. A notebook. I slid it across the table. She raised an eyebrow. What's this? Something to surprise you. She opened it. Inside, I had copied poems, some from books she had made me read, some I had found online, some I had tried writing myself. She was silent for a long time, flipping through the pages. Then, finally, she looked up at me. Her eyes were glassy, but she smiled. Okay, she whispered. You win. Win what? She closed the notebook gently, like it was something fragile. The last thing on the list. I leaned forward. So that means... She nodded. I owe you my name. I waited as she took a deep breath. And then, for the first time, she said it. My name is... She took a deep breath, like she was about to give away some great secret. My name is Claire. Claire. It was so simple, and yet it felt like something rare, like a word I had been searching for without even knowing it. I let it settle in my mind for a second before saying it out loud. Claire. She smiled just a little. Yeah, weird, right? After all that build-up. I shook my head. No, it fits. She traced a finger along the edge of the notebook I had given her, her expression softer than usual. No one's ever done something like this for me before. I shrugged. Guess I wanted to be on the list of things that actually surprise you. She exhaled a small laugh. Well, you are. For a moment, we just sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the coffee shop. I didn't need anything more than that. Finally, she closed the notebook and looked up at me. So, summer's almost over. I nodded. Yeah. She tilted her head. You ever think about what happens after? I thought about it. About the fact that in a few weeks, school would start again. About the fact that maybe she would disappear just as suddenly as she had appeared. But instead of saying any of that, I just said, we make another list. She raised an eyebrow. Another list? I nodded. Yeah, one that doesn't end when summer does. She smiled, and this time it wasn't her usual smirk. It was something warmer, something real. Okay, she said. Let's do it. And just like that, I knew. She was more than just a summer story. She was the beginning of something bigger.